On the 5th of November 1712, in the Cortes of Madrid, a 29-year-old king signed away a continent. Philip V of Spain, born Philippe de France, Duke of Anjou, grandson of Louis XIV, stood before the assembled Spanish deputies and read aloud a renunciation that had taken 2 years of war and diplomacy to extract from him. He declared for himself and for every descendant who would ever carry his blood that neither he nor they would ever inherit the crown of France. The document was precise, it was irrevocable. It was registered by letters patent in Versailles and enrolled by the Parliament of Paris on the 15th of March 1713. 5 weeks later, on the 11th of April, the Treaty of Utrecht incorporated the renunciation into international law, calling it a pragmatic, fundamental and inviolable rule. So a war that had killed 400,000 people across 4 continents was over. And a legal question that would outlast every government France has had since: monarchy, empire, republic, 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 had just begun. The renunciation existed because of mathematics. Between 1711 and 1712, a cascade of deaths inside the French royal family had rewritten the succession overnight. Louis XIV's only legitimate son, the Grand Dauphin, died of smallpox on the 14th of April 1711. His eldest grandson, the Duke of Burgundy, died on the 18th of February 1712. Burgundy's eldest son died 6 days later. That left only a sickly 2-year-old, the future Louis XV, between Philip V of Spain and the French throne. If that child died, Philip would inherit both crowns. The prospect of a single monarch ruling France and Spain simultaneously, a superstate stretching from the Netherlands to Peru, terrified every other power in Europe. Britain, Austria, the Dutch Republic, Savoy and Portugal had spent 12 years and hundreds of thousands of lives fighting the War of the Spanish Succession precisely to prevent this outcome. The renunciation was the price of peace. But peace is a treaty between nations. Succession is a law between God and bloodlines, and the question of whether a foreign treaty could override the fundamental laws of the Kingdom of France, laws that no king had written, that no parliament had enacted, that existed as constitutional custom stretching back to the Capetians, was a question that Philip's signature could not answer. It remains unanswered. 313 years later, 2 men alive today build their entire identities on opposite readings of that single document. Louis de Bourbon, Duke of Anjou, great-grandson of Francisco Franco, lives in Madrid and styles himself Louis XX, King of France and Navarre. He says the renunciation was void the moment Philip signed it, because the French crown belongs to God and the dynastic order, and no king can give away what is not his personal property. Jean d'Orléans, Count of Paris, lives near Carcassonne with 6 children and styles himself Jean IV. He says the renunciation was valid international law, registered by the Parliament of Paris, incorporated into a binding treaty, and that no descendant of Philip V has been a French citizen since 1713. And both men descend from the same ancestor, Louis XIII, who died in 1643. Both claim the same throne. The throne has been emptied for 176 years. Neither has stopped fighting for it. The fracture begins with 2 brothers. Louis XIII and Anne of Austria produced 2 sons. Louis, born the 5th of September 1638, and Philippe, born the 21st of September 1640. Louis became the Sun King. Philippe became the first Duke of Orléans of the modern line, receiving the duchy on the 10th of May 1661 after the death of his uncle Gaston. From that moment, the House of France divided into a senior branch, the direct descendants of Louis XIV, and a cadet branch, the Orléans. Philippe was a paradox manufactured by the state. His mother Anne and Cardinal Mazarin raised him deliberately effeminate, encouraged to wear ribbons and perfume kept from military training, surrounded by courtiers who would never let him develop ambitions that might threaten his brother. The strategy worked in every respect except one. Philippe turned out to be a competent soldier anyway. At the Battle of Cassel on the 11th of April 1677, commanding the French forces against William of Orange, Philippe won a decisive victory that secured Flanders. Louis XIV, consumed by jealousy, never gave him another command. Philippe spent the rest of his life accumulating wealth instead. The Palais Royal in Paris, the duchies of Valois, Chartres, Nemours, Montpensier and Châtellerault, plus the profitable Canal d'Orléans. When he died on the 9th of June 1701, and his estate was among the largest private fortunes in France, his son Philippe II inherited everything: the properties, the ambition, and the permanent resentment of a cadet branch that believed it deserved more than it had been given. Philippe II's moment came when Louis XIV died on the 1st of September 1715, leaving a 5-year-old great-grandson as Louis XV. The next day, Philippe persuaded the Parlement of Paris to overturn the dead king's will, which had placed governing power with the Duke of Maine, one of Louis XIV's legitimised sons by Madame de Montespan, and install himself as sole regent of France. He governed from the Palais Royal until Louis XV's majority on the 15th of February 1723, running France's finances, foreign policy and courts for nearly 8 years. Then the Orléans had tasted supreme power. The pattern was established and would repeat for the next 2 centuries. The senior line ruled by divine right, conservative, devout, inflexible. The Orléans waited in the wings, liberal, cosmopolitan, politically restless, and ready to move when the senior line stumbled. The 2 branches occupied the same palaces but inhabited different philosophies of what the monarchy should be. It was Louis XIV himself who had planted the seed of the Spanish complication. In 1699, the childless and decrepit King Charles II of Spain lay dying, and the question of who would inherit the vast Spanish Empire consumed every court in Europe. Charles named Louis XIV's grandson, Philippe, Duke of Anjou, as his successor. On the 1st of November 1700, Charles died. On the 16th of November, Sir Louis XIV presented his grandson to the Spanish ambassador at Versailles and reportedly declared there are no more Pyrenees. The 17-year-old Philippe departed for Madrid and became Philip V, the first Bourbon king of Spain. The senior French line now sat on 2 thrones. The Orléans, excluded from both, watched and waited. The senior line stumbled catastrophically. By the 1780s, the Orléans branch had become actively subversive. Louis-Philippe II, Duke of Orléans, born the 13th of April 1747, married to the fabulously wealthy Louise Marie Adélaïde de Bourbon, transformed the Palais Royal into something no royal residence had ever been: a commercial district, a political salon, and a powder keg. He opened its gardens to the public, lined the arcades with shops and cafes, and because Parisian police had no authority to enter a duke's private property, the galleries became a haven for radical pamphlets, Jacobin meetings, and revolutionary agitation. His personal secretary was Chodelos de Laclos, the author of Les Liaisons Dangereuses. Contemporaries called the Palais Royal the birthplace of the Revolution. The Duke's personal fortune, estimated at one of the largest in Europe, funded newspapers, printing presses, and the distribution networks that spread revolutionary ideas across Paris in the summer of 1789. On the 25th of June 1789, the Duke led 47 liberal nobles to break from the Second Estate and join the National Assembly, a decisive crack in the old order. By 1792, he had renounced his title and adopted the name Philippe Égalité. Then came the act that would poison the Orléans name for centuries. Louis XVI was tried by the National Convention beginning the 3rd of December 1792. The sentencing vote started at 8 in the evening on the 16th of January 1793 and lasted 13 hours. 721 deputies voted in succession. When Philippe Égalité's turn came, he declared, "Guided solely by my duty, and convinced that all who have attacked or will attack the sovereignty of the people deserve death, I vote for death." The final tally was 361 votes for unconditional execution, a bare majority of 1. Even his Montagnard allies were repulsed. When Louis XVI was told of his cousin's vote, he reportedly said the only words that betrayed genuine emotion during the entire ordeal. "It really pains me to see that Monsieur d'Orléans, my kinsman, voted for my death." Louis XVI was guillotined at the Place de la Révolution on the 21st of January 1793 at approximately 22 minutes past 10 in the morning. He attempted to speak. "I die innocent of all the crimes laid to my charge. I pardon those who have occasioned my death." But a drum roll ordered by an adjutant drowned out his voice. His wife, Marie Antoinette, followed him to the scaffold on the 16th of October. Their son, the 10-year-old Louis XVII, was separated from his mother and placed under the care of a cobbler named Antoine Simon in the Temple prison. Simon was ordered to break the boy of his royal habits. The child was made to drink alcohol, taught to sing revolutionary songs, and kept in conditions that contemporaries described as worse than those inflicted on animals. After Simon's departure, the boy was left alone in a darkened cell for 6 months. He died of tuberculosis on the 8th of June 1795 at the age of 10. His heart was preserved in a crystal urn and, after a journey through multiple hands across 2 centuries, was authenticated by mitochondrial DNA analysis in 2000 and placed in the royal crypt at Saint-Denis on the 8th of June 2004. Their daughter Marie-Thérèse survived, exchanged for French prisoners on the 18th of December 1795 after 3 years in prison. Philippe Égalité did not long outlive his cousin. Arrested in April 1793 after his eldest son's association with the defecting General Dumouriez, he was tried by the Revolutionary Tribunal and guillotined on the 6th of November 1793. At the scaffold, when the executioner bent to remove his boots, Égalité snapped, "This is a waste of time. You can take my boots off when I am dead. Let us hurry." His death cart was deliberately stopped before the Palais Royal so he could read the inscription "National Property" on the facade of his former home. He was 46 years old. He had voted for the death of a king and had died by the same mechanism 9 months later. The Orléans branch had now committed the one act that could never be undone. A prince of the blood had voted to execute the king, and his descendants would spend the next 2 centuries trying to claim the crown he helped destroy. Philippe Égalité voted to execute his own cousin and was himself executed 9 months later. I am curious, do you think his son Louis Philippe ever escaped the shadow of that vote? Let me know in the comments. The senior line returned first. Louis XVIII, brother of the executed Louis XVI, took the throne on approximately the 6th of April 1814 after the Allied forces entered Paris and Napoleon abdicated at Fontainebleau. He was interrupted by Napoleon's 100 Days and reigned until his death on the 16th of September 1824. He was a pragmatist. He issued the Charter of 1814, preserving civil liberties and the Napoleonic Code, honey understanding that the France he had returned to was not the France his brother had lost. His brother Charles X understood nothing of the kind. Charles reigned from the 16th of September 1824, with the conviction that the revolution had been an aberration and that France could be returned to its pre-1789 character by royal will alone. He passed the Anti-Sacrilege Act of 1825, which prescribed the death penalty for profaning the consecrated host. He suppressed press freedoms, and on the 25th of July 1830 he issued the July Ordinances, dissolving the newly elected chamber, suspending freedom of the press, reducing the electorate from 100,000 to 25,000, and restricting the franchise to the wealthiest landowners. Paris exploded. And during the 3 glorious days, the 27th through the 29th of July, some 4,000 barricades went up across the capital. Approximately 800 civilians and 200 soldiers were killed. Into this vacuum stepped Louis Philippe, eldest surviving son of Philippe Égalité. He was 56 years old and had spent the revolutionary and Napoleonic years in extraordinary exile, teaching mathematics in a Swiss boarding school, travelling through Scandinavia and the Americas, living for a time in a room above a barber's shop in Philadelphia. On the 31st of July 1830, the Marquis de Lafayette embraced him on the balcony of the Hôtel de Ville, wrapping them both in the tricolour, a theatrical gesture that effectively chose constitutional monarchy over a republic. Behind the scenes, Adolphe Thiers had been the key operator, plastering Paris with placards promoting the Duke as the liberal alternative. Charles X abdicated on the 2nd of August, intending the crown to pass to his 10-year-old grandson, Henri, the Duke of Bordeaux. Louis Philippe suppressed the request. The Chamber of Deputies voted him king 219 to 33 on the 9th of August 1830. He was styled Roi des Français, King of the French, not King of France, emphasizing popular sovereignty over divine right. For the Legitimists, this was the second betrayal in 40 years. The son of the man who voted to kill Louis XVI had now stolen the crown from Louis XVI's own grandnephew. The Duchess of Berry attempted to rally the Vendée on behalf of her son Henri in June 1832, but was arrested on the 7th of November at Nantes after being betrayed by an informer, and then revealed to the scandal of the entire royalist cause to be pregnant from a secret second marriage to an Italian nobleman named Lucchesi Palli. Louis Philippe reigned for 18 years. He survived 7 assassination attempts, more than any French monarch. Caricaturists drew his head as a pear, a visual pun on the French word for both the fruit and a fat fool. His reign ended as it began, in revolution. The February Revolution of 1848 erupted over economic depression and his Prime Minister Guizot's refusal to expand suffrage. On the 24th of February, Louis Philippe abdicated and fled Paris in an ordinary cab under the alias Mr. Smith, a studied contrast to Louis XVI's doomed flight in an ostentatious Berlin. He crossed to England with Queen Marie Amélie and settled at Claremont House in Surrey, dying there on the 26th of August 1850 at the age of 76. His last words were, "I am tired." His remains were later transferred to the Chapelle Royale de Dreux, the Orléans family necropolis his mother had commissioned in 1816. Meanwhile, young Henri had grown up in Austrian exile as the Comte de Chambord and became the man who, more than any other singular individual, determined the shape of modern France. Born on the 29th of September 1820, exactly 7 months after his father, the Duke of Berry, was assassinated outside the Paris Opera by a Bonapartist saddler named Louvel, Henri was called the Child of the Miracle, the posthumous heir who kept the senior Bourbon line alive, and the French public purchased the Château de Chambord as a christening gift. He never lived in it. He grew up at the Habsburg court in Prague and Frösdorf, speaking German as fluently as French, surrounded by legitimist courtiers who treated him as the king in exile. After Napoleon III's fall at Sedan in 1870, monarchists held a majority in the National Assembly, approximately 400 out of 650 seats. The fusion plan was straightforward. Chambord, childless, would take the throne. The Orléanist Comte de Paris would be named his heir. On the 5th of August 1873, the Comte de Paris travelled to Frosdorf Castle and formally recognised Chambord as the rightful king. Everything was in place: the parliamentary votes, the constitutional mechanism, the dynastic agreement. And a white horse was said to have been purchased for Chambord's entry into Paris. Then Chambord refused the tricolour. In his manifesto of the 5th of July 1871, he had written, "I will not allow to be torn from my hands the standard of Henri IV, François I, and Joan of Arc." On the 27th of October 1873, he wrote to the negotiator Charles Chesnelong, "No one under any pretext shall obtain from me my consent to become the legitimate king of the revolution." He rejected the tricolour, rejected a compromised personal standard, rejected every formula that would have given France its king. The Restoration collapsed on the 31st of October 1873. The Assembly elected Marshal MacMahon as president for 7 years, explicitly to wait for Chambord to die, yes, at which point the more flexible Orleanist line would take over. Pope Pius IX reportedly lamented, "And all that for a napkin." Georges Clemenceau mockingly called Chambord the French Washington, the one man without whom the Republic could not have been founded. Chambord died on the 24th of August 1883 at Frosdorf Castle at the age of 62, without heirs. His marriage to Archduchess Maria Theresa of Austria-Este in 1846 had produced no children. In a final act of dynastic spite, he bequeathed the grand colours and insignia of the royal orders not to the Comte de Paris, but to the Duke of Madrid, the Carlist pretender who represented the Spanish Bourbon line. The message was unmistakable. Chambord considered the Spanish Bourbons, not the Orléans, as his true successors. So when the Orléans princes came to pay respects at Frosdorf, Chambord's widow received them with 2 words: vultures. Disgusting vultures. At the funeral in Gorizia on the 3rd of September, the Comte de Paris attempted to take the first seat in the church and was told by the Duke of Parma, "I believe you are mistaken about your seat." Chambord's death opened the succession crisis that persists to this day. The majority of French monarchists accepted the Orleanist Comte de Paris as Philippe VII, the nearest male relative who was indisputably French. But a small faction, the Blancs d'Espagne, recognised Infante Juan, Count of Montizon, the Carlist pretender to Spain, as the senior male line descendant of Philip V and therefore the rightful king of France. The Orleanist case rests on 2 pillars. The first is the Treaty of Utrecht itself. Philip V's renunciation was formally signed before the Spanish Cortes, ratified by Louis XIV, registered by the Parliament of Paris, and incorporated into an international peace treaty. It was a condition of ending a war that cost hundreds of thousands of lives, and one party cannot unilaterally revoke a treaty obligation. The second is the vice de pérégrinité, the flaw of foreignness. French fundamental law required the king to be French. The 16th century jurist Charles Dumoulin argued that princes of the blood who have become foreigners should be excluded from the throne, just as the descendants of princesses. The Arrêt Le Maistre of 1593 explicitly forbade transferring the crown into the hands of foreign princes, and not a single descendant of Philip V held French citizenship when the succession opened in 1883. The Legitimus case invokes the equally fundamental principle of indisponibilité de la couronne, the inalienability of the crown. The king does not own the throne. It belongs to God and the dynastic order. He cannot appoint his successor, abdicate, or renounce rights that are not his personal property. This principle arose around 1419 to negate the Treaty of Troyes, which had attempted to disinherit the Dauphin Charles in favour of Henry VI of England. If the Treaty of Troyes was void because the king could not give away what was not his, the Legitimists argue, then the Treaty of Utrecht is void for the same reason. And Jean Bodin defined the fundamental laws in the 6 books of the Commonwealth in 1576 as leges imperii, immutable laws essential to the state that even the sovereign cannot derogate. The succession follows strict male primogeniture. A renunciation changes nothing. The irony is precise. Both sides invoke the same medieval constitutional framework, but legitimists emphasize inalienability, while Orleanists emphasize nationality. There has never been a definitive legal ruling. In 1987, the Orleanist heir brought suit against Louis de Bourbon's use of the Duke of Anjou title and the undifferenced royal arms. French courts dismissed the case in March 1989 for lack of jurisdiction. They refused to adjudicate a dispute over an extinct throne, saying the National Assembly itself had punted once before. In 1791, its constitution included a parenthetical noting that nothing is prejudged on the effect of renunciations in the dynasty actually reigning, passed 698 votes to 265. The law of exile, enacted the 22nd of June 1886, triggered by the lavish Orleanist wedding at the Hôtel Matignon that alarmed Republicans, banned the heads of formerly reigning families and their eldest sons from French soil. It forced the Orléans into exile in England, Belgium and Morocco. Henri, Count of Paris, born 1908, enlisted in the Foreign Legion under the alias Henri Orliac to circumvent the ban. The law was repealed on the 24th of June 1950. Henri, son Count of Paris, who styled himself Henri VI, was the most politically active pretender France had seen since Louis Philippe. He attempted to mediate between de Gaulle and Giraud in wartime North Africa, meeting both men in Algiers. De Gaulle later said that if the Count had joined him in London in 1940, together they could have done great things. After the exile law's repeal, Henri returned to France, opened the Château d'Amboise to the public, published a political bulletin reaching 30,000 subscribers, and repeatedly reshuffled the succession, disinheriting sons for unauthorized marriages and divorces, reinstating them, disinheriting them again. He endorsed François Mitterrand's re-election in 1988, outraging his royalist base. He reportedly whispered to a daughter on his deathbed, "I will leave you nothing but hatred." He died on the 19th of June 1999 at the age of 90. The once vast Orléans fortune had largely vanished, dissipated through bad investments, legal disputes among 11 children, and the costs of maintaining royal pretensions without a throne to fund them. The legitimist line grew steadily through the 20th century, carried by the Spanish branch of the Bourbon. After the Carlist male line died out in 1936, the claim passed through the Spanish royal family to Infante Jaime, Duke of Segovia, second son of Alfonso XIII. Jaime, who was deaf and had renounced his rights to the Spanish throne, styled himself Duke of Anjou and pressed the French claim. His son Alfonso married Carmen Martínez Bordiú, now the eldest granddaughter of Francisco Franco, in 1972, a marriage that bound the legitimist line to the most controversial political dynasty in 20th century Spain. Their elder son Francisco died in a car crash on the 7th of February 1984 at the age of 11. Alfonso himself died in a skiing accident near Vail, Colorado on the 30th of January 1989 at the age of 52. This left their second son, 14-year-old Louis Alphonse, as the legitimist pretender, a teenager who had lost a brother and a father within 5 years, inheriting a claim to a throne that had been empty for over a century in a country where he did not live. Action Française, the nationalist movement founded by Charles Maurras in the 1890s, initially championed the Orleanist line. Maurras was explicitly Orleanist, even though his counter-revolutionary ideology was philosophically closer to legitimism. The movement was condemned by Pope Pius XI in 1926, dissolved after the liberation in 1944, and reconstituted in 1947. A left-leaning splinter, the Nouvelle Action Royaliste, broke away in 1971 under Bertrand Renouvin and aligned itself with the Orléanist cause. But over the decades, as the Orléanist pretender Henri drifted leftward, endorsing Mitterrand, expressing sympathy for decolonisation, many conservative royalists crossed over to the legitimist camp. The Blancs d'Espagne, once a tiny faction dismissed by mainstream monarchists, grew into a significant force. And the political realignment mirrored the personal one. The Orléans represented constitutional liberalism. The Bourbons of Spain represented traditionalist Catholicism. The same temperamental split that had divided Louis XIV from his brother Philippe was still producing opposite poles 3 centuries later. Jean d'Orléans was born on the 19th of May 1965 in Boulogne-Billancourt. He holds a master's degree in philosophy from the Sorbonne, a master's degree in law, and an MBA from Azusa Pacific University. He has worked at Lazard, Deloitte, and Banque Populaire. He holds the rank of reserve colonel in the French army, commissioned in January 2015. When he became the Orléanist pretender on the 21st of January 2019, the anniversary of Louis XVI's execution, when his father, Henri, died at the age of 85. He married Filomena de Tornos Iron Steinhardt, born the 19th of June 1977 in Vienna, in a civil ceremony on the 19th of March 2009, conducted by Mayor Rachida Dati in Paris, followed by a religious ceremony on the 2nd of May at the Cathédrale Notre-Dame de Senlis. They have 6 children: Prince Gaston, born the 19th of November 2009, Princess Antoinette, born the 28th of January 2012, Princess Louise Marguerite, born the 30th of July 2014, Prince Joseph, born the 2nd of June 2016, Princess Jacinthe, born the 9th of October 2018, and Prince Alphonse, born the 31st of December 2023. In September 2020, Jean and his family were evicted from the Domaine Royal de Dreux after a dispute with the Fondation Saint-Louis, the family heritage foundation that controls the Château d'Amboise, the Chapelle Royale de Dreux, and other Orléans properties. A lawsuit demanding €1 million and the restitution of 5 properties was suspended in June 2023 and settled in January 2024. With Jean named cultural ambassador for the foundation. He relocated to Montreal, a small commune near Carcassonne in southern France. On the subject of Louis de Bourbon's claim, Jean has been direct. It is not his country, it is not his legitimacy. He participated in La Manif pour tous protests against same-sex marriage in 2012 and 2013, expressed support for the Yellow Vest movement in 2018, and in May 2019 hosted President Macron and Italian President Mattarella at Amboise for the 500th anniversary of Leonardo da Vinci's death, a moment where the pretender to the abolished throne received the President of the Republic that abolished it. Louis Alphonse de Bourbon was born on the 25th of April 1974 in Madrid. His full Spanish name is Luis Alfonso Gonzalo Victor Manuel Marco de Borbón y Martínez Bordiú. Through his mother Carmen, he is the great-grandson of Francisco Franco, a lineage that energizes his far-right supporters and repels others. He holds dual French and Spanish nationality, the French citizenship acquired through his paternal grandmother Emmanuelle de Dampierre. He studied at CUNEF University and IESA Business School and worked for BNP Paribas in Madrid. He married Maria Margarita Vargas Santaella, daughter of Venezuelan banker Victor Vargas, in a civil ceremony on the 5th of November 2004 in Caracas, and a religious ceremony the following day in La Romana, Dominican Republic. No members of the Spanish royal family attended. King Juan Carlos disapproved of the Duke of Anjou title printed on the invitations. They have 4 children: Eugénie, born the 5th of March 2007, twins Louis, Duke of Burgundy, and Alphonse, Duke of Berry, born the 28th of May 2010 and baptized at St. Peter's Basilica on the 5th of September 2010. And Henri, Duke of Touraine, that's born the 1st of February 2019. Louis is the more internationally visible of the two claimants. He attends the annual Mass for Louis XVI at the Chapelle Expiatoire in Paris each 21st of January. Approximately 900 people attended in 2024. In 2002, the French Society of Cincinnati elected him as the representative of Louis XVI. On March 2018, he became honorary president of the Francisco Franco National Foundation. He has ties to the Spanish far-right party Vox and its leader Santiago Abascal. In October 2025, amid France's rolling political crisis, its 8th Prime Minister under Emmanuel Macron, Louis published a statement in the Journal du Dimanche declaring that the Fifth Republic seems on the verge of collapse and that he considers it his role as head of the House of Bourbon to speak on the crisis. He describes himself as a monarchist, but not anti-republican, and advocates a constitutional monarchy where the king serves as moral authority, foreign ambassador, and unifying figure. The Orléans family retains significant patrimony through the Fondation Saint-Louis, recognised as a public utility institution since 1974. It manages the Château Royal d'Amboise with over €12 million invested since 2000, and the Domaine Royal de Dreux, including the Chapelle Royale, where Louis Philippe and dozens of Orléans princes lie buried, the Château de Bourbon l'Archambault, and the Chapelle Notre-Dame de la Compassion in Paris. The legitimist line holds no major properties in France. Louis de Bourbon maintains residences in Madrid. His institutional vehicle is the Institut de la Maison de Bourbon, founded in 1973, recognised as being of public utility in 1997. French royalist organisations number at least 16 active groups. The Alliance Royale, a political party founded in 2001, deliberately refuses to choose between the two branches. The Cercle d'Action Légitimiste, founded 2015, supports Louis de Bourbon explicitly, and polling conducted over the past decade consistently shows approximately 17% of the French public would accept a monarch. Approximately 80% are firmly opposed. The throne of France has been emptied since 1848. The Republic has been continuous since 1870. The Constitution has contained, since 1884, a clause declaring that the Republican form of government shall not be subject to amendment, though constitutional scholars note that this clause is itself paradoxically amendable. The Treaty of Utrecht has never been litigated in a French court. The fundamental laws of the Kingdom of France have never been codified. The question of whether Philip V's renunciation was valid remains exactly where it was on the 5th of November 1712, unanswered. Jean d'Orléans lives in a small commune near Carcassonne with his wife and 6 children. His youngest, Prince Alphonse, was born on the last day of 2023. Louis de Bourbon lives in Madrid with his wife and 4 children. His eldest son Louis, Duke of Burgundy, born 2010, carries the title that was held by Louis XIV's grandson, the one whose death in 1712 started all of this. The Orléans family buries its dead in the Chapelle Royale de Dreux, under fleur-de-lis carved in stone. The Bourbon-Anjou line has no chapel in France, no property in France, and 64,000 followers on Instagram. One family owns the tombs. The other claims the bloodline. The oldest constitutional question in Europe belongs to both of them, and to neither of them, and to a country that answered it in 1793 with a blade and has refused to answer it with a law ever since.